7:02.
7:02.
Stephen is on the Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, more proof today of the impact higher fuel prices are having on you. Inflation for the month of June coming in at 5%. It was just 3% in February. The real difference, of course, oil prices. Diesel up 50%, petrol by 32% since the conflict started. Sanisha Packirisamy is the chief economist at Momentum Investments. Sanisha, good evening. We knew it would be bad. This is higher than expectations and really a reminder of the impact of fuel prices.
So much for having me, Stephen. Yes, it was a bit worse than what the markets were even looking for. So investors were expecting an acceleration in inflation, but only to about 4.7, 4.8% in year-on-year terms, and it came out at 5%. I think what is going to be a bit more concerning for the central bank's deliberations on monetary policy is the fact that we've seen underlying inflationary pressures, or core measures, as they call it, that basically strips out your more volatile components like food and fuel. That having gone up in this monthly print from 3.8 to 4.1% in year-on-year terms. And the other concern is, of course, services. And the reason that the central bank is quite concerned about services inflation is that it does tend to move in tandem with inflation expectations. And of course, that can lead to high inflationary prints further out. And on services inflation, that actually rose from 4.7% to 5.2% in year-on-year terms for June.
Isn't it all going to get worse because council's financial year, municipalities, was the 1st of July, and that means that electricity and water prices are going to be factored in. Rates, everybody in Cape Town's been complaining about that. Presumably, that's going to be a bigger factor going forward.
So we've had a couple of those administered prices coming through into the basket already. What we actually have is the peak of inflation being reached in the June print, and inflation steadily moving lower throughout the course of this year. We actually have inflation getting to about 3.7, 3.8% by the time we get into March. But as you note, the administered prices have been quite problematic in this print. CPI for administered prices as a standalone actually reached 15%. 15.5% in year-on-year terms. And of that 15.5%, 10% came, well, your 10% is fuel, 2.8% is electricity, and then the one was from water. And then the rest were kind of the rats and mice within that administered prices category.
Food price inflation is still relatively well contained. There are a few reasons for that. There was very high meat price inflation last year. Coffee inflation finally coming down. White rice is down 13% deflation there. But if oil prices stay high, I presume we're going to see it spreading through the rest of the economy at some point.
So I think we're seeing, the good news coming out of food prices now. So, food inflation at 1.4%, slightly lower than the 1.6% year-on-year that we saw for May. And as you point out, it was meat inflation was quite a key driver there. Meat prices, the inflation went from 7.3 down to 5.1. And this is because we continue to see the rollout of the vaccinations for foot and mouth. But we also had reasonably good summer harvest. So you actually had, fruit prices going down and vegetable prices going down. The concern, however, is going into kind of your October, November, into the March of 2027 period. And this is when weather conditions are going to play a key role in the next planting season for the summer crops. And if we do indeed end up, as the weather experts are suggesting, with a very dry than normal season, which we call El Nino, then we could potentially see food prices heading up higher into 2027. What does count in our favor, however, is soil moisture and quite healthy stock levels from a good harvest that we experienced this year. So that should provide somewhat of an offset. But with the negative weather impact coming through, and of course higher fertilizer and higher diesel prices, that does add to headwinds to food inflation for 2027.
The Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee statement tomorrow, a 25 basis point hike. This was higher than expectations. Today's figure, I'm hoping no one mentions a 50 basis point hike.
They did deliberate a bit on a 50 basis point hike in the last meeting. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see a split of views on the committee. Now, at the start of this month, economists were quite split on whether or not we are going to experience another interest rate increase. But then, of course, we had the reignition of the conflict in the Middle East. And I think everyone now seeing the oil price back at almost, $95 per barrel, are now expecting that we will see the next move being up at this next meeting. I think that they would on the side of rather splitting the 50 basis point increase into two increments of 25, given that we are still very uncertain about the duration of the conflict and where the oil price developments are likely to go from here. So I think they'll play a more sort of cautious stance rather than scaring the market by doing a 50 basis point increase and signaling a much more aggressive approach to monetary policy.
Sanisha, thanks so much. Sanisha Packirisamy is the chief economist at Momentum Investments, 20 minutes after 6.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
An announcement from the retail giant Pepkor today, creating a massive new fintech company. Their flash business, which they own, they're merging with the established player Shop to Shop. So Pepkor will put in about 1.5 billion rand to get a controlling share of the new fintech company. But its shares in Flash, which obviously go into the pot, are worth over 10.5 billion rand. Koki Koiman is a banking and investment analyst, joins us now. Koki, good evening. Really appreciate the time. Thank you. We can see how quickly the fintech space is moving. Pepkor, I presume, looking for more opportunities to get clients. How do you understand the logic behind this move?
Yeah, Stephen, it's indeed a very interesting development, and it's been coming for some while, but they've acted quickly. So just for background, the lower end of the consumer market, sort of the cash market, has for long been ignored by the formal banks, mainly because of high volumes, low transaction cost, and it's very expensive to service that and to have branches, etc., etc., etc. And for many reasons, it was ignored, and then slowly there were a lot of players who started to grow, start selling devices into that market, until Lusaka was really a big one who came and put together a lot of the pieces and started providing services to both clients in that lower end unbanked market and to the traders and spaza shops. And now Pep has actually suddenly outflanked Lusaka by combining two businesses. The one is Flash, which it's developed over the past, I think, 8-9 years as a startup, and it's grown very rapidly. In fact, Flash originally just was a vendor of airtime and electricity products inside the spaza shops, and it now offers a much wider range of products, including cell phones. But it's merged that now with Shop to Shop, which is an independent business, also grown over the last number of years, to provide services a lot like Kazang in the Saka stable, providing services to the traders. In other words, merchandising, finance, even stock movement, a lot of data management as well. Why is this so important? Is because the two together obviously now offer a much wider range of services and can outflank the banks, and it's going to make it, and Lusaka, and make it more difficult for them to compete in this space. So the two combined will be fairly big, but it's still a very, very large market. So a lot of space, but the competition is gonna heat up.
I mean, Pepkor, they've got a bank they're launching this year. I presume there'll be some kind of interplay between them, but they're kind of on their way to becoming a major player in finance. Retail's where they started, but suddenly, actually, their focus is going to be moving elsewhere. I mean, and this tells us something about how perhaps the retail sector is changing.
Yes, absolutely. So Pep bought Ubank part of a transaction, I think October 25, And I see, and I think they see it as well, very much as integrating this as part of the bank to be able to offer transaction services as well, and savings products. Well, initially savings products and then transactional banking. But you're quite right. And why PIP can do this, and I've been thinking the whole day about, I think it is a world first. The closest is what Time Bank has done in Philippines with a retailer, but that's quite different. I don't think there's been a retailer. I must go and check up again, and they've successfully managed to penetrate banking. I mean, Lloyd's in London and Walmart and all those have tried, but eventually all sold, but they tried to do lending. But PIP here is penetrating the banking services largely because it's got a huge client base. It's got all the retail space, which the UK banks and so also had, but it's got a lot of data. The world has changed with the changing in computing, in that you can get a lot of data on your clients and make the lending much less riskier, and you can start looking at the behavior. And that's really been, I think, the learning from Capitec. Capitec is data obsessed about understanding the client and what they do. So I think Pep has looked at that and said, we can do this as well, because we've already got 32 million clients. We've got the retail space. We just need the banking software. Okay, it's not that simple, but I think that's really where they're going to.
It also shows you how important size is going to be. We've got plenty of other smaller banks, but most of them are going for a completely different market and also come from established players. So think Old Mutual, think Discovery Bank, think Bank Zero, all of those things. I mean, they may come from established players, but they're going for a completely different market. Pepkor is seeing something that they're not able to compete with.
It is actually quite amazing. As you say, Discovery, I think in the end it cost them, let's say, 7 billion rand and more than 10 years, I think, from inception, when they got Barry Hall and the team across to do the software and the hardware, and the same with Old Mutual, has been working on this for years and years. And Pep come and buy a smallish team, and then now buy another unit and going to combine those three with Flash and potentially have a bank. Just by the way, remember what Pep will offer will, at the moment, at the start, be totally different from Discovery. Discovery is a very higher end market, offering mortgages and transactional services. Same with Old Mutual Bank. It's quite different. But Pep is starting at that lower end, which is a more simplified product. But yet, they are doing it. You're quite right.
Koki Koeman, really appreciate the time. Thank you. The banking and investment analyst on The Money Show. 27 minutes after 6.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Chris Stewart's the portfolio manager at 91. Chris, good evening. Welcome back. The Pepkor deal, Koki Koeman thinks it makes sense from all sorts of directions. Do you agree?
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, Stephen. I mean, it's an interesting transaction. It's one that I think the writing was on the wall for a long time. It was only a matter of time before the interests, I guess, of Shop to Shop and Flash were consolidated. It's been a governance concern that the business has had for a long time, with the chief executive of Pepkor being a significant minority shareholder in Shop to Shop, and Shop to Shop arguably competing, at least to a degree, with what was being done through Flash, and all of this rolling up into a larger financial services strategy with, I guess, Pep declaring they want to go further into banking with their Pep Bank operations. And it'll be interesting to see how that coexists in parallel with the fintech code that they're developing, and whether ultimately they move their financial services entities in their entirety into this particular structure, because from a banking capital perspective in particular, the operational risk capital loading that they might have to hold if they put all of their financial services businesses inside their retail operations may be detrimental to that operation. So that's one of the factors to consider. The other factor to consider, I guess, is that, as they become more and more an established bank, they are going to face more and more regulatory scrutiny, and some of the factors around particularly phase compliance, FICA, anti-money laundering, know your client, etc. When you are going into the less formal markets, servicing less formal retailers and merchants in particular, it's going to be interesting how they, I guess, get around, or not necessarily get around, but how they equip themselves for those sort of issues. I think they're going to find that the compliance burden and the capital burden of banking is not quite as simple as anticipated. Typically across the globe, we've seen retailers underestimate to a degree the complexity of banking. But I think a lot of the points that Koki made around access to data, access to clients, access to distribution are all valid points and point in their favor.
Inflation figures today, presumably cementing an interest rate hike tomorrow, and inflation suddenly becomes the big problem again.
Yeah, I mean, it's tempting to say, but, a lot of this is driven by transient factors. It's driven by transport inflation, and the transport inflation is almost entirely as a result of fuel price increases, and hopefully this passes. But equally well, we've got a fairly bearish central bank. They have made it very, very clear that inflation targeting at 3% is very important to them, and managing inflation expectations is important. So we probably are going to see another 25 basis point hike tomorrow, which, in the face of the sort of retail sales data that we're seeing, we saw the RLC data coming out for the month of June today, as well as the Stats SA data for the month of May. And particularly if you look at the former, the RLC data, it's looking as though retail is in a pretty tough spot right now. Retail sales under a lot of pressure, and a further interest rate hike is hardly going to help.
Chris Stewart, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Portfolio manager at 91, bringing the time to 6:30.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, yeah, interesting voice notes coming through. I was asking about the vehicle recalls. Your response to that on 072 702 1702.
On the issue of the vehicle recalls, which brand do you trust? It seems nothing's going right for Toyota. As well, the Chinese brands, how is it the consumer will be able to get his car service if parts are not available because of the Iran war, and we bring crude is used for many commodities? So are we not caught in the middle of this thing? Please check on the vehicle companies if they can get spares and it readily available. Thank you. Enjoy your evening, EB.
Yeah, thanks, EB. Yeah, I mean, I think there are concerns about the vehicle recalls. So many of them from established brands, and I think that really is the big issue.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
More developments in what I suppose is the mess that is the situation in the top levels of the Public Investment Corporation today. Bloomberg reporting its chair, the Deputy Finance Minister, David Masondo, has told them he'll fight to keep his position as the Finance Minister. And technically the representative of shareholders, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, has called a meeting on Monday to consider dissolving the board of the PIC. At least 6 members of the board are now understood to have quit, so it's no longer quorate. In the end, depending on how you see it, the real issue seems to be the decision by the board to suspend the CEO, Patrick Blamini, over a whistleblower report about the Lanseria airport deal. You'll remember the PIC ended up paying over 400 million rand to a BE partner based on what is alleged to have been an inflated valuation of Lanseria. Jabulani Sikakane is a columnist at Business Day. He's worked in government, in the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank. Jabulani, good morning. You suggested today the real problem here is politics, and the person who's the chair of what is the biggest investment fund on the continent is actually a politician, as deputy minister. What do you think is really going on?
Yeah, I think if you go back to what the party commission recommended or stated, in fact, back in 2018 in its report, it made it clear that you can't have a deputy finance minister as the chair of the PIC board, because a similar kind of similar events had happened around the same time that the party commission was sitting, right? At the time, Mondli Gungubele was the deputy minister of finance and was also the chair of the PIC board. And similar kind of unfolding of events took place. Eventually, as the party commission report states, when the PIC board met on 1 February 2019, the chair, which was Mondli Gungubele, excused himself from the meeting to take a call from Mr. Mboweni. And then when he returned to the board meeting, he told the board that Mr. Mboweni told him that he's giving them until Monday, the 4th of February. If they don't resign, he will fire them. Right. So then they all resigned then. You know, other directors had already resigned from the board by then. So I think there were only sort of 6 or 7 board members left, or 8, by February 2019. So we've been here before, and the Party Commission made it clear that, look, this issue of having a deputy finance minister as the chair of the board creates instability. You know, so you need a an independent non-executive director to chair the board, and that secondly, you must also then develop a criteria of what skills the person who needs to chair the PIC board requires. Now, the problem with a process like you have at the moment, which it's actually a legal requirement now in terms of the amendments to the Public Investment Corporation Act of 2019. There's no, the person who's a deputy finance minister or a deputy minister in the economic cluster, as the legislation requires, the skills that they have may not necessarily match what the chair of the PIC board requires. So there could easily be a mismatch. But it's been made a legal requirement. So you're now kind of caught in a trap where you can be saddled with the appointment of someone as a legal requirement who actually doesn't have the requisite skills to chair the board.
I mean, Jabal, the problem is that it'll take a political fix to fix this. And, I mean, I can't see any appetite at all to change it. I mean, to do the political fix that you need. I mean, you would need, it's the biggest investment fund on the continent. You would need the continent's best investment brain there, and that's not what's going to happen.
Well, you'll have to change the law first, because it's a legal requirement. Now, changing laws, is something that takes time. And you might actually have struggles in Parliament, also maybe in trying to push through amendments to the bill. So that could take a while. I mean, legislative changes take quite some time. I mean, it's rare to have something rammed through processes very quickly. So the Minister of Finance is in a bit of a bind. So he will either have to appoint his other chief minister, which also
from the DA.
Creates its own, which also kind of creates its own political kind of problems. Or look at the kind of deputy ministers in the economic cluster as required by the legislation. Because it's either deputy minister of finance or one of the deputies, in the economic cluster.
Jabulani, quickly if we can, but isn't this all about control? And it's such a big pot of money that there's going to always be a political fight about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of money, It's where the money is, really. If you look around, there aren't that many government or state institutions where there is this kind of easily accessible money.
Jabulani Sikhakhane, thanks so much. Columnist at Business Day, but as you know, worked in government in the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank. Appreciate the time on The Money Show.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking, turning intent into execution. That's how ABSA are invested in Africa's energy future.
So often I find myself wondering if today will I have what I suppose some people call the holy trinity of my needs met. Will I have water, electricity and Wi-Fi all working at the same time? You may remember the website. It's called ESP. It had another name, Eskom's or something. It became very prominent during load shedding. Load shedding, I think we can say, is over. It's now moved, and now ESP is monitoring water, power, and internet disruptions across the country. Dan Southwood-Wells is the founder of ESP. Dan, good evening. what kind of information are you trying to provide to your clients? What are you trying to do?
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we're trying to answer the question, as we did with load shedding as well, is it down for everyone or is it just me? And I think everyone knows, like everyone's had in the situation where, your power's out, your water's out, your internet's out. And you want to find out, is it something that's happening, to all of my neighbors or it's something that's just affecting me? And that's the answer that we're seeking to solve. So with that, we took all of our knowledge and experience with load shedding and sharing, this complex information in a very, very simple way. And we took on our community of users with an ESP and we gave them a very simple way to just let everyone else know, do they have power, do they have water, do they have internet? And they have a button within the app. And with that, we can do really, really clever things with their neighbors and share information, share some graphs, and put them all together and say, yes, actually, all of your neighbors' power is off, all of your neighbors don't have water, have a chat. Then we start looking at the chats that they have. Potentially someone mentions like, oh, they've seen something or they've got a reference number. And then on the side, we're pulling in data from various other sources. So we're pulling in data from social media, we're pulling in data. Cape Town happens to have a list of outages that we can pull in, and we can then push that into the chat as well and say, like, actually, there's an official source as well as, the community and crowdsource source of data that's happening.
So, we're a big country, lots of different places, nearly 300 different councils. How do you collect all of this information? Not everyone everywhere is sort of on social media or reporting it in that way. Where's the raw data coming from?
The raw data is coming from users. So from the days we had 10 million users using Eskom's push. Now we're calling the app ESP. And now, even though we've got, we don't have load shedding, we still have a substantial amount of users. We've got about 1 million users using the app on a monthly basis, 100,000 on any given day. And they're coming into the app and they're looking for answers to questions. And they are the ultimate best source of information that we can find. Before any official announcement comes from your ward councillor or your municipality or your power provider or internet service provider, users are saying, hey, we've noticed something, and we can aggregate that information together, and we can say, in the suburb, at a suburb level now, we can see some sort of issue. And then we start monitoring from that point onwards, and we start adding on information and saying, yes, there is an issue happening here.
In the past,
users.
Okay, so in the past there was one big thing that you were monitoring, which was power, and there were two real sort of ways that was done. One was through councils, one is through Eskom. You had lots of users, and if you had two-stage load shedding and you had access to all of the timetables, you would know what that would mean. This time, you're creating almost a three-dimensional map. Now, isn't that a very different level of complexity? The information that you portray, what you're trying to tell people, all of that's very different. Or do you just have three separate maps and do it like that, even though a lack of electricity will affect water eventually and presumably Wi-Fi too?
Yeah, so we've categorized it. So they are within the app and within the API, which you can access the data from. It is categorized between power, water, and internet. And then within the app as well, there's some other categories as well, because maybe there's some conversations you want to have, recommendations, lost and found, et cetera, but we've categorized it to that level. At a high level, if you go to esp.info, you can see a handy little map there, and you can see how many reports there have been today for power, water, and internet. It's a macro level, so you're like, oh yeah, sure, there's lots of reports all day. But then you can drill into that information. You can say, okay, wow, Gauteng looks like a hotspot. Let's go into Gauteng. Oh, there's something happening in Ekurhuleni. What's happening in Ekurhuleni? And then you go, actually, right down to suburb level, there's a spike happened in the last 30 minutes in suburb name X. And we can see at that level, it sort of blows my mind that we can see it like with a couple of minutes of notice, we can see there's an outage happening in a suburb. Also, a big change from when we were more load shedding focused is that we're not operating at a block level anymore. So you'll remember back during our heyday of load shedding, you were block 7 in City Power or City of Cape Town, something like that. But now you're not. You're not Block 7. You're actually, if you're in Cape Town, then you're Sea Point, or if you're in Johannesburg, you're, I don't know, Orlando West. You're not a whole block that's been aggregated together. So we hyper-focused on that specific suburb, and the users are having conversations in those areas as well, so with their neighbors.
Very quickly, Dan, if you can. I mean, are there trends you can see? I mean, I would imagine in Joburg, for example, on any given day, lots of water and lots of electricity issues.
Yes. I mean, we've been looking at this data for quite a while, and we've only recently made it very publicly available so that people can browse it for free on our websites, but also, from a business perspective, use it within their operations. What I've been noticing over the last sort of 6 weeks to 8 weeks, whilst I've been building this, is that there's a lot of issues happening in Gauteng. Ekurhuleni, City of Johannesburg, City of Tshwane is trending all the time. And water is actually becoming quite a higher problem than electricity in those areas. Over the weekend, Orlando West, they had no information, and they had no water for, I think, 2 days, with very, very limited information from councillors and from, City of Johannesburg. And it's just tough. As these people all coming together, like, where's my water? When am I going to get water? How do I get water? Has anyone seen the truck? And then, there's a truck. And then, thank you so much. Everyone's running to find the truck. So it all comes down to that question for the users: is it just me, or is it everyone? And let's help each other get through this situation. And then from a business perspective, use the data to improve your efficiencies.
Dan, thank you. Dan Southwood-Wales is the founder of ESP.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
Well, lots to come in the next little while. We'll be talking about absenteeism, major problem. We seem to have quite a high rate of absenteeism. I can think of several reasons as to why that is. Wendy Nola, looking at Chinese cars, just the sort of experience of it. Lots of talk about it, especially in light of all of the recalls we're seeing of the more established brands in South Africa. Don't forget Dr. Mark Nasila, the AI expert. He's your shapeshifter this evening. You're with The Money Show at 7 o'clock.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
How often do you start your working day, I suppose, wondering if everyone's going to come to work? How many people will be working with you today? If some just won't make it for some reason, people are marked as absent. And there are plenty of suggestions that on any given day in South Africa, around 15% of workers are absent for one reason or another. I mean, I find that an incredibly huge figure. Renee Ruchter is the Reward and Benefits Lead Advisor at Pay Me Now. Renee, good evening. I mean, 15%, that's such a high number. It must cost a fortune.
Good evening, Stephen. And yes, indeed, it does. The absenteeism costs are estimated between 12 and 16 billion a year, and with more recent estimates placing the figure above 20 billion. So for organizations, this is a massive impact on their bottom line.
Is there a particular reason why our absenteeism rate seems to be relatively high compared to other places? I realize, and I don't think we spend enough time talking about this, our society is a very stressful place, and that must have an impact on workers.
No, absolutely it does. So, Stephen, what we see from research is obviously there's different pockets of absenteeism, and one must be very careful to use a blanket approach. People are obviously ill from time to time, and there are other reasons besides financial stress, which is nowadays one of the big factors in absenteeism, where employees simply either don't have the money to come to work, or alternatively, they have been borrowing from loan sharks, and the loan sharks are waiting outside of the offices to collect at the end of the month, which then contributes to that massive absenteeism rate.
That's frightening. So people aren't coming to work because they're afraid who's waiting for them outside, someone they owe money to.
Exactly. Somebody might be breaking a leg, and it's nothing to do with theatre. So what we're seeing is it's just that employees are financially stressed if they don't have money for transport, if they have ill children that they can't look after, or they don't have somebody to look after them. That means they stay away from work, and that contributes to that absenteeism rate overall in South Africa to a large extent.
So a lot of workers will get sick leave, which means the company kind of loses out. But I'm sure a lot of workers must lose out on income as well. They won't have sick leave to cover all of it, and some of it will just be, absent.
Absent and unpaid leave. Quite often one sees the unpaid leave figures to be quite high. As I say, those statistics that I've just quoted encompasses all leave and all absenteeism rates. But surely one needs to look at this from a different perspective. If you can reduce absenteeism in a business, what does that save the organization? And when an employee is not at work, obviously output is lost and deadlines slip. Colleagues have to absorb the extra load, which further raises stress and erodes the morale of the people who showed up in the organization.
What options are there for corporates to manage this? I mean, if income is the problem, it's quite difficult for an employer to do much about that. I think while companies are for profit, if many people will be aware, I mean, we all kind of know bits of our fellow workers' lives. If we could pay people more, I would like to think some people would. Maybe not all of them, maybe not most of them. But surely it's quite difficult to for an employer to do much about that.
Well, look, as much as employees are under strain from a financial perspective, that is equally the same environment for employers. So whilst there isn't much that you can do about it from an increased perspective, because obviously sustainability is a huge factor for South African corporates, there are employee benefits that will assist employers to manage absenteeism rates. So, for example, Pay Me Now offers a financial solution which is very holistic in its approach, and looking at how you can help employees manage their pay cycle when they seriously need some cash injections in the middle of the month. This is not additional funds made available by the employer, but certainly they have access to earned wages, and that is a small portion of their wages being made available to them in the middle of the month to deal with these stressful situations, and rather than going to either regulated or unregulated credit providers in the market.
Renee Ruchter, thanks very much. The Rewards and Benefits Lead Advisor at Pay Me Now on Business Unusual tonight, 15 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Consumer Ninja.
Well, lots of conversations at the moment about Chinese car brands, and you'll know, of course, how much value they seem to give. So many people talking about them. Conversations too, though, about after-sales service. What happens if something goes wrong? And Wendy Nola, your consumer ninja, has been looking through her inbox. Plenty of stories there. If you want to know what's really going on in the consumer world, just check out Wendy's inbox, which thankfully she does not make freely available to you. One case involves the flagship SUV at Cherry. Costs around R1 million. There was a problem with the vibration that the repairs just wouldn't fix. Wendy, good evening. What went wrong with this car?
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, so it's the Cherry Tiggo 9 plug-in hybrid. It was introduced to South Africa last August, and Ricardo bought a demo model from a dealership in Alberton in January. And actually, he's bought two Cherries from the same dealership this year. But that flagship, very pricey, almost R1 million car of his, the Tiggo 9, developed a noticeable vibration at high speeds, particularly, and the dealership investigated found that the acoustic foam inside one of the tires had come loose. So that's a layer of foam glued to the inside of premium tires to reduce road noise in the cabin, to give you that insulated feeling, right? So Cherry's prescribed repair protocol is to reattach the foam rather than replace the tire. Fair enough. Dealership did that, didn't work. Within 2 days of collecting the car, the vibration was back and getting worse.
Sure. Okay, so if it were me, I would have gone back and said, look, I would like a new tire this time, please.
Yeah, which is what he did. And he was told what all dealerships say about tires, and that is that they're not covered by the warranty, being a wear and tear item. And that's generally true, but this was not wear and tear, as I pointed out to Cherry South Africa, and it wasn't accident damage. This car has just 12,000 kilometers on it. Foam detaching inside a tire on a virtually new car can only be called a defect. And of course, there's safety elements as well. The car's been driven mainly by Ricardo's wife with his 2 young children, and he wasn't prepared to accept a vibrating car, as you know, that's, you're going to have to deal with it. So he copied me on an email that he sent to Cherry 2 weeks ago about the issue, and I then responded by sending Cherry SA a media query pointing out that in terms of Section 56 of the Consumer Protection Act, if an attempted repair fails within the first 6 months, or actually at any time, let me refresh that. If a repair to a defect that happens in the first 6 months, as this did, fails, then the manufacturer cannot attempt a second repair. The consumer is entitled to a replacement. And I made the point that you can't, we all know this, you can't just replace one tire. You've got to replace at least 2, right? Both front or back, to preserve the car's steering, braking, and traction.
So what happened
that was
after?
my email.
So what happened after that? What did Cherry say?
Okay.
No one wants to get an email from Wendy Nola.
Well, I first heard from Ricardo himself, who shared an email from one of Cherry's customer care managers to say that they are replacing the tires, not 2, but 4. And that's going to be done by the end of the week. And I confirmed that with Cherry South Africa's media liaison person. So I would say that's the right outcome. And it's the second time this year that Cherry has surprised me on the after-sales front. In January, a medical rep in Durban wrote to me about her 3-week-old Cherry Tiggo 4. She loved everything about the car except for one thing, which made her feel unsafe. Every time she cut the engine on the car, all 4 doors would pop open, and she felt vulnerable if she was sitting, stopped and was on her phone or something like that. And I didn't hold out much hope. She didn't want the car anymore. It was very new at the time, fairly new at the time. The company acknowledged the security risk in the South African context, authorized a full refund, and revealed that its research and development team in China was working on a revised locking logic specifically for our market. So that was pretty encouraging, I would say.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I realize people are very careful about that sort of thing. And for a long time, actually, cars sold here have sort of had an auto-locking feature when you start moving and all sorts of things. Some of the other brands, the cheaper brands, there's, I think, a perception that maybe they don't sort of do much after-sales stuff. What are you finding when you get in touch with people, when things go wrong? What does your inbox tell us?
So I'm finding, particularly with the Chinese brands, and I think, they understand it's all well selling loads of cars, but if they have a reputation for poor after-sales service, it's not going to serve them in the long run. So I'm finding, admittedly, people come to me when they haven't been able to get the response that they want themselves. And I'm finding that they just they exceed my expectations. Just before coming on air, actually, I'd taken up a case of 2, what were they? Let me not say the wrong brand. Goodness me, just 1 second. Jatua. 2 T1s, SUVs bought in different parts of the country, 2 different cases, both bought in January, both experiencing electronic issues. And because they weren't major mechanical safety issues, they were being told, repeated, let's try and fix it, going on for months. I took up the case and I said, is this the kind of after-sales service that you stand by? And I've just heard now that they're replacing both the cars. And this is what I keep getting. It happened with a BYD vehicle that I took up recently. A major part failed at just 2,500 kilometers. Car was 6 weeks old. When the part finally came from China, well, I shouldn't say finally, 2 weeks later, neither the dealership nor the OEM, the car maker, could figure out how to configure it into the car because they'd never had this problem before. And I said, well, it's 4 weeks off road. Will you consider replacing the car after 6 weeks? And they came back and said, we'll replace it right now.
Sure.
So, so that's kind of what I'm seeing. And I then asked the motor industry ombudsman, Johan van Vreden, I said, what are you seeing with these cars? How are they dealing with after-sales issues? And he said, initially, the response to consumer disputes was what he called poor, to say the least. He said, but after our office made a concerted effort to explain the CPA and its consequences to them, they have certainly come around and are currently performing just as well, and in certain instances, more enthusiastically than our traditional automotive industry. And I think we can take from that they really, really putting concerted effort into making sure that they don't have a reputation for bad after sales.
Very quickly, Wendy, I mean, apart from getting your email address, what's your advice to someone who's looking at some of these SUVs, these Chinese SUVs at the moment?
Okay, so I would say if a defect occurs in the first 6 months, that you must know that the CPA is going to entitle you to insist on a repair or a replacement or a refund, your choice. Put your complaint in writing, escalate past the dealership to the manufacturer if you have to. If you don't get anywhere and the car is financed, ask your bank to cancel the deal. There's a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that says you can do that. If that fails, go to the Motor Industry Ombud. That's free. Or the National Financial Ombud if your bank won't do anything. And of course, there are journalists such as myself who will take up your case, but know that, whatever badge you buy, there's a chance that things will go wrong. Ask about their parts holding and ask about their policy for VOR, which is vehicle off-road. Ask them, how many weeks before my car's off-road will you give me a courtesy car? And hopefully they'll say 1.
Sure. Wendy Nola, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. And of course, we have all these recalls of other brands as well at the moment. 26 after 7.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
24 minutes now to 8 the time. You'll have heard conversation about AI after conversation about AI on The Money Show and just everywhere. And one of the people we really look to get an understanding of what's happening and what's going to happen is sitting in front of me now. Dr. Mark Nasila is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at First National Bank Risk. He's been involved in many things, although I suspect that his first love might be mathematics. Let's ask him. Mark, good evening and thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Good evening, Stephen, and to the listeners who are joining us. Very excited to be here.
Am I right? Mathematics, is that your first love?
Mathematics and numbers.
Why? Where did that come from?
My first influence was my dad. And he was a statistics lecturer.
Oh, really?
And he taught me statistics in first year, and naturally it was very easy to connect. But I've always had a passion for logic, how the world is connected, and I felt numbers were better placed to represent that. And hence my passion. When I look at my transcript from high school, I think mathematics stood out very clearly that it was an area that I felt much in love with.
You must have been quite difficult to teach, because your father would have known more than the teacher, and therefore you probably knew more than the teacher.
More passionate, but also more connected to the subject. And it was less effort being committed to the journey of, applying knowledge, studying calculus at university, and going all the way to doing mathematical statistics as a PhD.
I'm going to ask you about your thesis in a moment, but I'm always interested in people who are good at maths. And I've met some people who I can just see are naturally good at maths. Some of them I've met socially, and I can see they see the world differently to the way I see the world. Now, some people see the world very visually. I don't. I see it through words. But some people do see it through numbers like yourself. And yet, I think as a country, our big weakness is that we are not producing enough people who are good at maths. And that is about opportunity as well. How important was opportunity for you?
For me, I felt I was very lucky in the way I was taught mathematics. I felt a lot of my colleagues went through a journey where mathematics was positioned as a very complex computational subject. I was a bit lucky, but from high school, university, and all the degrees, it was positioned as a subject that represented the world, how the world works. it presented the logical aspects of how the physical world and how things worked. And it made it interesting, and it drove my curiosity. And when I finished my first degree, I felt there was more for me to study to be able to apply knowledge. Hence, I had to pursue, further studies. But it's more about connecting it to the world and making it relatable, which I feel everyone should study mathematics.
So if you say to someone, maths is all of these numbers and formulae and X's and Y's and goodness knows what they come up with, that means one thing. But if you say to someone, look up at the sky at night, the stars are where they are relative to each other because of mathematics, that's a different sell.
Exactly. And that's what we call today explainability of how things happen. In primary school and high school, people are taught how to pass mathematics.
Yeah.
They're not taught to understand the things they're taught in mathematics. I do think it's, to me, without prejudice, it's one of the easiest subjects because it connects how things work, the world in which we're in it today. It connects inputs to consequences as a function of how we relate to the world, the physical world. And you look at it closely, it's a subject that is very easy to understand if it's taught well. But you see, the young stage of learning mathematics is very, very important, especially at an early childhood level, because that's where the logic is embedded in someone's development of the mind.
So, I mean, I think it was true 100 years ago that if a country was producing lots of young people who are really good at maths, that country was going to do well. And if you weren't, you aren't. And I look now at the big gap between us and so many places like the United States and China and bits of Europe with AI. And I kind of almost shudder about how big that gap is. I mean, is that something you think we could ever fix? I mean, we would need to start even before grade 1. Really?
We can fix that. And I think this revolution we're seeing today is leading to the reimagining of the future of education. And not just mathematics, but we're talking about skills like critical thinking, the ability to adapt, to learn and unlearn, which together work with mathematics. But it's an opportunity today to do that much easier, other than to wait for another wave when the whole world has moved on further. But it's not going to take that much effort because, what they say, mathematics is the mother of all sciences. And I've seen in some departments in universities where mathematics falls under the Department of Psychology because it's an enabler of everything across all domains.
If I had to go to almost anyone and say, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at First National Bank Risk and a person who's an expert on AI, where did they study and which province are they from? Almost certainly people would say to me, UCT, Wits, Western Cape or Gauteng. But in fact, you're a Kenya, but the Eastern Cape.
Yes, Walter Sisulu University. And I've had a very adventurous journey in my studies. I did mathematical statistics and computer science at Walter Sisulu, then moved to Nelson Mandela, did an honors, then master's. Then I felt I needed to apply knowledge. I had the theory of mathematical statistics and computational sciences, and that's why I joined the bank and decided to pursue a PhD. And it may be the most exciting study because my PhD was about applying mathematical knowledge in solving real-life problems. And at that time, big data was something that was booming. The likes of Google, Facebook was starting to go big. And I could tell that machine learning was going to shape the future.
So I looked for the title of your PhD and I couldn't find it. And I'm sure if I spent more time or known which AI model to use and spoken to you beforehand. But I do know that it focused on rare event modeling, fraud, money laundering, and default risk.
Yes.
So when you talk about trying to apply it, what were you trying to do? Were you trying to say when someone like Grootes is going to go bust?
So these were machine learning models for identifying these events accurately as a way of creating operational efficiency. Statistically, you're trying to flag a rare event, an event that happens very few times. In the financial services sector, fraud is a very small proportion of all transactions. And therefore, traditional statistical techniques struggle to learn to differentiate between what is suspicious versus what is not. So my PhD was about improving on the existing theory to adjust these techniques so that we can be able to use data to behaviorally and accurately detect these incidents.
I would imagine in a world in which it seems there's more and more risk for various reasons, your thesis becomes more and more important.
So the structure of this problem actually represents how life works. Whether you're in the building and construction industry and you're trying to understand how many days of the year will rain so that you can plan properly. The financial sector, rare diseases, that's biology. If you look at the aviation industry, things you want to know happen rarely because most of the world happen in a very deterministic way. And the statistical structure of the problem is the same. And up to today, machine learning and AI experts are still trying to improve on this methodology to cater for some of these events because they don't happen often, but when they happen, they're very disastrous and expensive.
The field that you work in, how has it changed in the time you've been working in it? Because now everyone in public just talks about AI.
Yes.
But when you started, that's not what they were talking about. As you say, machine learning was the sort of thing. Now it's very different. I mean, you must have seen it change quite fundamentally. Did one lead to the other? It would make sense to me that big data, machine learning would, that AI would rely on those two things.
It's been a bit of a build on each other and probably a mass improvement. And it's been driven by three major factors. When I joined the bank in 2010, I was a data scientist. We built machine learning algorithms, but more focused on things like marketing, credit scoring, trying to offer the right customer the right product. But the computational power that has come today, the amount of data that's been collected, and also just the improvement of the science and its ability to solve problems and represent life has meant that we can actually do more. And it's been a build on that. So some of the techniques we use today existed for maybe 20, 30 years. The AI we talk today has actually been there for a long time. Some of the deep learning techniques we're talking about. It's just that the fact that we have got so much data and the digital connectivity we have is generating so much interaction. Our behavioral data we're generating is allowing us to model more and more things, predict the next word and the next word, which is what we have in platforms like Gemini and ChatGPT.
So, I mean, I think a lot of us. So I mean, it was a long time ago that a computer first beat a human being in chess, consistently. Okay. And yet it was really only kind of 2022, 2023 that everybody started looking at ChatGPT and consciously, I'm sure there's a word we'll come back to, but consciously using AI kind of on a regular basis, on an individual level. I'm sure that other people were using it before that. What was the big shift? Was it couldn't just have been ChatGPT? Was it something else? Was it just we reached a kind of aha moment, a consciousness moment, when all of these things, deep learning, big data, and computing power, and the cheapness of it, and presumably computer access, all of these things suddenly arrived at this moment?
So I think the science existed.
Yeah.
When you talk about the Go game or the computer beating, Kasparov, it's a similar science, reinforcement learning. The transformer model that is used to to engineer ChatGPT existed before. But I think the excitement around the Go game or the chess game is less compared to the excitement about the fact that you've got an AI system that can predict and generate human-like language. That actually, shifted the level of excitement. But also, let's not forget, it came up immediately just after COVID, where the whole world was down, recovering from these lockdowns, and therefore we needed something to drive our excitement up. And when ChatGPT was launched, it gave a lot of business leaders and citizenry hope of how the future could turn out.
Could it also just be that ChatGPT is more like us because humans like words and images, which ChatGPT does and did, whereas before it was really a very specific, almost mathematical thing. Beating chess, Go, which is much more complicated than chess as far as I understand it. That's all quite mathematical. So that would have got Mark Nasila very excited. But Stephen only got excited when it really did words.
ChatGPT is equally mathematical. It's not close to being the us, and I'll tell you why. These are just probabilistic models that predict the next word and the next word based on how these words appeared on the data they were trained on. There's been talk of artificial general intelligence reaching human level. But being human is not about predicting words and generating language. Look at you and I are speaking now. I'm holding a mouse next to a microphone. Our physical world has got more than generating language. It's made of more interactions. So they are probabilistic, but I must say this science is on another level because it's promising so much reimagining of the future.
So long as you take the red pill, right?
Exactly.
Dr. Mark Nasila is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at First National Bank Risk. He's an expert on AI. He's with us for a few more moments. It's 9 minutes to 8.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
8 minutes to 8 the time. We're speaking to Dr. Mark Nasila. He is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at First National Bank Risk, but also an expert on AI. Mark, the impact about AI on society. So some nights I go to bed thinking some of us are never going to work again. And some mornings I wake up thinking AI will never replace humans. No one can drive that badly. Do you change your view on what's going to happen? Or do you have a fairly consistent view on what's going to happen?
I sometimes change my views on what's going to happen based on the advancement and things we're discovering. I'm part of a science community, Singularity University, and the wider community. Sometimes some of the studies that come out, for example, we were talking about what is AI's impact on an economy, despite the fact that everyone is trying to drive efficiency. If every company was to automate and lay off employees, who is going to buy their products?
Yeah. I mean, that's always the question I can never... And also, just because there's so much more content doesn't mean there's more demand.
Exactly. So that is something which us as AI scientists don't think about. Economists had to think about that and bring that as a reality. And then you also talk about the obsession about automation and productivity, the trap about, not thinking about human intelligence because we obsess about algorithms. So sometimes you think you change your views based on the reality that is being presented to you. But in my day-to-day life, I'm almost a marketing guy, promoting in my role at work. I basically evangelize and sell the role of AI within the organization. And that is a baseline.
You're also an expert on risk for your organization, which is a bank. And there was a lot of talk about the Claude Mythos 5 model, that it could hack into cybersecurity systems, that its capabilities were actually more than they'd been designed to be, which scared quite a lot of people. I've always thought that, we used to worry about a sort of an Eskom shutdown, kind of load shedding stage 15 where there was no electricity for a week, which didn't happen. I think our society would survive that, actually. But I don't know if our society would survive if one of our big banks was hacked to the point where people thought they would never be able to access their money again. I mean, if I look at my accounts and my bond and my home and all the rest, and if I had to think that's all gone, I don't know how I would react, and I would be one of many people in the same situation. I mean, is it a possibility that one of our banks is hacked by some AI model? And I mean, I realize that I'm just punting a Netflix movie here, but, is that a possibility?
Listen, some of the attacks we're seeing are so complex and so advanced because the criminals we're talking about are not the guys who steal the past. They're guys who are using technology. And fortunately, the banking system and our cybersecurity teams have been at a step ahead in not just putting controls, guardrails, but also outthinking. When the story about Mythos came about, already regulators across the world were concerned. But most importantly is that leveraging technology to making sure you protect yourself against technological attacks. Am I saying that banks are not vulnerable? I'm not saying that. We've seen organizations across the world being attacked from a cyber perspective, and it's about being a step ahead in an ongoing basis compared to waiting for an attack. Some of these attacks you'll actually never recover from them, based on some of the examples we've seen in other industries.
Sure. Well, that's cheerful. Mark, we are supposed to, in this segment, talk about what you do for fun.
Yes.
And as I've been talking to you, it struck me that I'm someone who reads history books for fun. My wife always says Stephen takes textbooks on holiday, but they'll be about, South African history or Russian history or whatever. And I've never seen anyone reading maths books for fun. And it struck me when you were talking about how maths is really about understanding the world, that history books are about understanding the world. And so is maths. And yet that's not, you never see someone on a beach with a sort of maths book or anything to do with maths, actually.
We have a lot of storytelling books from a mathematical perspective. Though I don't spend a lot of time reading mathematical and sciences books. I do read a lot of AI books. I do read opinion pieces on AI. Actually, I make sure I read at least 5 scientific publications every day.
Sure.
To keep up with what's happening. But for fun, I like being at the gym, clearing my mind once in a while, the golf course, but also just socializing and getting away from this logical world.
Being with people,
interacting with people.
Do you enjoy traveling? Do you get a chance to travel much?
I do get a chance to travel once in a while, both for work as well as just for holidays. And switching off, having new experiences, new food.
Yes.
Yeah, and learning new cultures.
I always think Southern Africa is one of the best places to go on holiday because you can do anything. You can do, you can do the bush, you can do the animals, you can do the sea, you can do the nothingness, you can do the mountains, you can even go, Lesotho, sort of skiing. Any particular place that sort of sticks out for you that has just stayed with you, a particular holiday?
I love Cape Town.
I'm sorry to hear that.
France, Paris. I think people don't understand how blessed we are to have places like Cape Town, Durban, Kruger Park. These are beautiful places the world yearns to, get a step into. And if you travel in Europe and experience a bit of London, East Africa, Zanzibar is beautiful.
Dr. Mark Nasilla, it's been wonderful having you. Thank you
so much.
Chief Data and Analytics Officer at First National Bank Risk.